Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. This is episode 14, season 5. We are going to do a little bit of a different episode this time. Change it up a bit. I'm here with Jason Roba, my trusty cohort and co-anchor, and we're gonna get into the church. The corporate Church of Scientology and what happened to it. That may not be the working title, but we'll get a good one to draw everybody's attention on this. So I wanted to start out first. Did you know, Jason, that there is an organization above the church called CST?
Yep, I am aware of them. I think I've heard Captain Bill maybe talk about them. Ooh, he would be another one to have an entire podcast topic on, or a whole few podcasts on Captain Bill sometime.
Yeah.
But anyway, CST, they're not Scientologists either, right? They're...
No, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. So, here we go. So, CST is the Church of Spiritual Technology. That's what it stands for, CST.
Yeah.
It's also known as the L. Ron Hubbard Library, which I'm sure everybody has heard of before in one area or another. So in addition to owning all of the copyrights related to Scientology, it also owns all commercial interests in and controls the most important trademarks related to the church. Dianetics, the organization, you name it. So thereby it gives CST complete control over the other trademarks registered by CST's subordinate corporations, better known as the Religious Technology Center, or RTC. That's what they present at the events is, RTC this and RTC that and all of that. But there's actually a shadow hand above it called CST that gives the marching orders. And so this gives and this is going to be interesting. We'll get into this more. This is where the IRS let me give this to you again. It gives the IRS control of the crucial Scientology trademarks too, because the IRS controls CST. Let me repeat that. The IRS, Internal Revenue Service, controls the Church of Spiritual Technology. Now, maybe some of you folks would remember back in the 90s when they said, the war is over with the IRS. We won. And they took a straight picture and they took a funny picture of everybody celebrating and being silly and stuff because this long feud between Miss Cabbage's corporate Church of Scientology and the IRS was supposedly over. Well, there was a winner and it wasn't the church.
Right.
So let's set this up for you. How the IRS controls Scientology. Not only does the IRS have a hotline telephone set up with the top people running Scientology, Davey Miscavige, IRS also has ordered that they receive regular reports about any change in the leadership or organizational pattern of RTC, which really, it's become a hey you org board because he micromanages everything. So there's hardly anybody left. I mean, when's the last time you saw Guillaume Leserve or any of those other guys at any of these events, because they've all been taken out and taken up into Canada in the woods somewhere where they can't get away.
Taken out, but not to lunch. Yeah.
That's right. So, in other words, the IRS is set up over Scientology precisely as any CEO is over any organization. Now, this is planned by Mead Emery. Mead Emery, let's back up. Mead Emery is a former taxman. He is the architect of the Hubbard probate and the entire existing Scientology empire. He was an assistant commissioner of the IRS with Commissioner Donald C. Alexander at the time. This is over 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago, and was legislation attorney to the Joint Committee on Taxation. Mead Emery is the tax and probate mastermind who created the Church of Spiritual Technology, which we're talking about, CST. Then weaseled it when it was exposed, and he was asked about it. And we get to that later. So, to get back to the IRS part of it, now that we know who Mead Emery is. Okay, so basically the way it works is you've got CST Senior Board of Special Directors, non-Scientologist tax attorneys. Remember these names, folks. Sherman Lenski and Stephen Lenski, their brothers, non-Scientologists, tax attorneys, and Lawrence E. Heller. They are over the Church of Spiritual Technology, or CST, which owns and controls all copyrights and trademarks related to Scientology. Also owns for-profit corporation Author Services, which sells the fictional works that they still, if they still sell them, I'm not sure. And that is over RTC, which is over Bridge Publications, CSI, which is the Church of Scientology International, the mother church, and inside that is OSA. Guess what? OSA is the tax compliance section as well. And over all of the advanced organizations, FLAG, AOA, AOSH, AOEU, all of it. Then below that, you have your Class 4 orgs. So prior to Mead Emery engineering the takeover by the IRS, what happened is all the organizations and intellectual property of Scientology were in one container, so to speak. The Hubbard Association of Scientologists, or HASI, which was something LRH set up long ago, prior to 1966, in fact, which was, guess what? And you've got some data on this. Feel free to chime in with it, what you know about your mom. Lost my place here in my notes. Was protected. The HASI was protected by, guess who? The Guardian's office.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. That's where your mom worked, right?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. I'm pulling up her email right now where she's got some notes about when she worked for a special project there. Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Mead Emery and his federal cronies knew this, so their first step was to infiltrate Norton S. Carno and the Lenski brothers into Church of Scientology, California. In other words, to get some moles into the organization. And the Guardian's office. Carno and the Lenskis surreptitiously began transferring some of the intellectual property back to, quote unquote, this entity known as Hubbard into his estate property, then allowed the HASI, to be revoked.
Right.
So there was a lot of smoke and mirrors, and all of the crazy things that they do with corporations and everything. So they basically shut down what LRH had put in place, leaving the rest of the organization hung out to dry. Within 2 months of that, the HASI incorporated revocation. Emery and his government pals had the Guardian's office raided by the FBI.
All right, there it is. Yep.
Okay. So in 1978, after Carno and the Lenski brothers completed gutting CSC of the intellectual property, covertly transferring all of the copyrights back to, quote unquote, L. Ron Hubbard, unquote, into his estate property, and in 1979 wrote a Hubbard will, a new will, making Carno executor and trustee over the Hubbard estate, leaving only the final phase of the IRS Mead Emery plan left. So in 1980, the IRS plants, the Lenski brothers, set up a different firm from Carno's, Lenski and Heller, for, quote unquote, once removed deniability, and they were then, quote, hired in 1981 by co-conspirator Norman Starkey. Some of you might remember Norman Starkey. He was one of LRH's trusted guys.
I'm sure my mom knows some of these people. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure she does.
Yeah.
The Lenskis go ahead.
I was just going to say, for everybody listening, and I've got this email from my mom. She was part of a special geo within the U.S. Guardian's office. I might be paraphrasing that, Mom, so you may be able to put a correction here, but she said about that same time frame, while she was still in the USGO, she had this is quote, I had no concept of the infiltration of the Church of Scientology or corruption of the tech. As a USGO coworker started dropping veiled hints to me periodically, the one instance that stands out the most is that he pointed to potted plants in the room, saying, paraphrasingly, there are a lot of plants in this room. Yes, right in this room. I wondered if I could actually be hearing this. Of course, it stuck in my attention going forward. So she had a coworker there who was trying to be like, nudge, nudge. there are plants here, not the kind that, that are potted.
Grow.
Not the kind
Green.
that grow. Yeah, right.
Soil.
Yeah. So yeah, she had a coworker that was aware of the plants, and she didn't put any names in there as to who that was, but that's one
Well,
story.
there you go.
Yeah,
I mean, that's from boots on the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so in 1980, these plants, the Lenski brothers, set up a firm separate from Carnot's, like I was saying, and then hired everybody into the game from the outside while on the inside. The Lenskis and Norman Starkey, backed by Meade Emery, removed the controller over the Guardian's office. Mary Sue Hubbard.
Yeah, right.
That's who LRH put in place to take care and control things if he passed away. Okay, now we'll get more into that later. Let's see here in my notes. With a letter from attorneys to her stating such, and disbanded what was left of the FBI demolished Guardian's office, using Starkey to oversee the Sea Organization, quote-unquote, numerous missions to accomplish it, leaving nothing but a stripped CSC and the lower organizations and franchise missions. And then this was in 1980. This was before the Mission Holders Conference. I don't know if anybody knows about the Mission Holders Conference. But that was the line of demarcation where what they did is they went to different towns where there were lots of missions around, San Francisco being one. And they went in and said, you're going to give us $10,000 right now. And you're going to give us your books. We want to see them, or you're going to be declared on the spot. This is what happened. There are witnesses I have spoken to who were there firsthand. We have a public that was around at the time too, who's written a write-up on it. This is what they did. And a lot of the people told them they could take a long walk on a short pier and walked out of the room, didn't care whether they got declared or not. This is the line of demarcation where the church left LRH's hands publicly and the takeover was complete.
Right.
By the evil emperors. So, where does this leave us? And in 1981, when the Lenskis and Heller started, it's interesting that Heller is in there because that's a character name in
General
one of
Heller.
LRH's books as well. General Heller.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Right.
Started setting up all the new improved corporations to be run by the IRS, exactly according to Meade Emery's master plan. Okay. So with an understanding of how the intellectual properties, the IP, like Disney has Mickey Mouse and Star Wars and all that stuff, with an understanding of how the intellectual properties IP were stripped out of CSC, its divisions, the H. Hubbard Communications Office, and transferred into CST, and therefore into control of the IRS. Several notes about they have a chart above here. As a corporation, CST has no protection under the First Amendment of the Constitution, and so can be and is controlled by government agencies, including but not necessarily limited to the IRS. The IRS materially participated in the planning and establishment of the existing corporate structure. Through their architect of it all, former assistant Meade Emery, expressly for this purpose. It's a fraud top to bottom, basically.
Yeah.
That was largely created by the IRS and is being run by them through 3 non-Scientologist tax attorneys that have handpicked special directors for CST in the richest and most powerful of all of the corporations in Scientology. So RTC is promoted in Scientology literature as being the owner of the trademarks, and indeed is listed with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as owner of those trademarks. Which is not reflected in those records are contractual and estate documents, basically ones purportedly given to RTC by LRH in 1982, but in which transactions he withheld all commercial interest, which then passed to RTC. So CST also has contractual right to take back all of the other interests and goodwill in those key marks from RTC at any time in CST's sole discretion. So they can pull the rug out from under the church anytime they want to. Now, none of the other marks that RTC has registered have any value at all without those key marks, which include the Sea Org symbols, the Scientology S and double triangles, which is ARC, KRC triangles. the Scientology cross, Dianetics triangle. This very covert control mechanism that they had was set up by Meade Emery and the IRS to hide the fact of CST's control over RTC. So it was like a shadow corporation.
Yeah.
Is what it, by modern day terms, that's what it would be. A shell company.
Yep, shell company, exactly.
So RTC gained the international notoriety for being involved in copyright litigation, making most people believe falsely that RTC owned the copyrights. They don't.
Right.
RTC never owned any copyrights. The reason RTC was involved in the sensational copyright wars against the internet was because the contested documents, this is back in the 90s, the mid-90s, were the advanced technology materials, the OT level. This is how we got the OT levels.
Right.
Okay, which RTC is licensed by CST to sublicense to the advanced organizations. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
The OT levels are licensable by them. Okay? I mean, I just find that creepy as all get out. They are licensable. And sorry, I just got to laugh at that for a second.
Yeah. I know.
RTC, can you believe that?
I know that.
You know, that's like saying we own the patent to your DNA
and license it. That's like what.
This is something that
this is actually happening right now. Yeah, with was it Ancestry.com and 23andMe? They now there's that company.
That's right.
Was it Blackstone or BlackRock, whatever it is?
Yeah.
Now
BlackRock
now owns that DNA. They own the sequence. They own
right. That if you've given it to Ancestry.com and 23andMe,
they own your
what?
DNA.
Your DNA
can be licensed.
Is proprietarily theirs and not yours.
Right. Yeah.
That's creepy.
Yeah. Now
this is the type of personality we're dealing with.
Yep. And now there's this new, not to go on too bad of a tangent, but now there's this new disease that's coming out. That whatever they call it, the what are they calling it now, Jonathan? It's in the UK.
Omicron?
No. It's not a variant. They're calling it something like Disease X or something. They've got some fancy name for it.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever that is. Yeah. And an old an old Gil Bates is going around talking about the next pandemic, and so it's like, oh, they own all this DNA.
Right.
Yeah. So it just makes me wonder. And then there's been this news about the biolab that was found in California, owned by the CCP. It's like, well, here we go.
Yeah, that's right. So this is the same breed of cat doing that did this 40 years earlier. Okay, this is the antisocial personality at work here, folks.
Yeah,
this is why we did that show for Wednesday, and this is Friday's show.
Yeah.
So let me see. I lost my place here. Okay, so RTC also is contractually obligated to CST, their parent company, to protect the trade secrets and the copyrights in the advanced technology. Let me read that again. RTC also is contractually obligated to CST, which is above it, to protect the trade secrets and the copyrights in the advanced technology, even though CST is the copyright owner.
So let me ask a question here, Jonathan. So with them being okay, so this is a hypothetical, and it's a question. So with that being said, there is somebody there, most likely what they call it, the OSA. One of their missions,
Office of Special Affairs,
would be to go out and ensure then that technology is not being used in the field outside of the church, right? They would want to make sure. Okay, so that explains some things then. So if they, okay, all right, enough said.
We've found that the material that was on the internet 20 years ago is not the material that's on the internet today.
Right. And some of it you can go and still
find. They've altered the internet and propagated it.
Yeah, you can still find some of it on Yandex over on Russian servers. But
the veracity of it is it live or is it Memorex? Type of a thing. You don't know if it's real or it's not. I mean, I've seen the Fundamentals of Thought, a copy of Fundamentals of Thought that has all kinds of what I would say alterations to gender in it. Yeah. So be careful what you download and you believe as source, because this is what these guys are doing. Because they're They're pulling the stuff out there that is off by litigation threat, and then they're putting stuff up to mess people up. Instead in replacement of it.
So is that what happened then to the pilot? Not the one from the R6 implant, but the pilot.
Well, he knew too much, and they said that he killed himself, but but he was a really good guy, really good guy, and he was found at the bottom of his pool with a couple of what do they call those? The big bricks,
cinder blocks,
not cinder blocks, holding him down, chained to his ankles.
Yeah.
And they said, well, he committed suicide, but it was not suicidal, and everybody that knew him said, no, that's not that guy. So he had data that they didn't want him to put out.
Yeah.
So these are the sorts of things that happen. I mean, I could tell you stories. All of the people that retrofitted the free winds and there's a whole story about the free winds, as well as the guy that owned the free winds before the church got a hold of it. He didn't want to sell it to Miscavige, and he ended up dying under mysterious circumstances as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they got the free winds. Then guess what? The free winds was completely outfitted with asbestos.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And guess what? You know who did those renos?
Yeah.
The Sea Org did those renos, and they used guys who were, in lower conditions, and they didn't give them masks to remove that asbestos. Yeah. I have this firsthand. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to raise a big fuss or anything about this, but I'm just saying, there's a serious line of overts here.
Mm-hmm.
So so this is. I want to repeat this last one. RTC also is contractually obligated to CST to protect the trade secrets and the copyrights in the advanced technology, even though CST is the copyright owner. This was set up this way intentionally by Mead Emery and the IRS to hide CST's control, sort of like a double blind kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Some have even speculated, with good reason, that the IRS agents were involved in instigating the copyright wars for the express purpose of getting media exposure that would create this exact false impression in the public that it was CST and not was RTC and not CST. So, to hide the relationship, the withhold, Bridge Publications is the other corporation that's been involved in copyright litigation, by the way. Bridge is the corporation that publishes all of CST's copyrighted works. Inside Bridge Books and Publications, you'll find the copyrights belonging to L. Ron Hubbard Library. It's not owned by L. Ron Hubbard.
Right.
Okay. It's a completely different entity, which is simply a fraudulent, fictitious business name for CST. So CST and the L. Ron Hubbard Library are one and the same. Another covert trick that Mead Emery came up with. But Bridge is the front corporation for CST that, like RTC, is contractually bound to defend CST's non-advanced technology copyrights, even though CST is the exclusive owner of all those copyrights. So the office, and this is where your thing came in, the Office of Special Affairs is placed organizationally as an attachment to the corporation known as the Church of Scientology International, but OSA also has direct ties to CST that are hidden in the intellectual property relationships between CST and OSA. The Way to Happiness book, for example, and trademarks are solely owned by CST. And the marketing and selling of that booklet and its related programs are under the social coordination branch of, wait for it, OSA. So when you have all these guys going out
Yellow Jackets
to these disaster zones and Yellow Jackets and everything else, they're indirectly OSA agents, if not directly, handing out Way to Happiness books.
Mm-hmm. So that's
this.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I've got this whole conspiracy theory that's been going together in my awareness for the last several years, and that would make sense with the ties that Miscavige and et al. Have with the contractor types. The Blackwater types, the mercenary types, and that makes sense now with those Yellow Jackets and all of them going out and doing that humanitarian aid thing. How there can be these
how it all ties in.
Yeah. So it would just not surprise me that there are contractors, operators that are contracted by OSA, or I guess at this point CST, that are working with them. So that kind of ties that all together now. All right, operating on foreign soil with their yellow jackets on. Yeah.
That's right. Social Coordination Branch of OSA. This provides a covert cover for direct command and control from the IRS through CST into OSA, which was also created and set up by Meade Emery. But perhaps most important in IRS command and control into OSA is the Senior Tax Compliance Office to get all the Scientologists to make sure they're paying their taxes. This includes, what's that guy's name that makes all the money and has the YouTube videos and all that stuff that, you too can make money like me and become a Scientologist?
Oh, I don't know.
What's his name? I always forget. Well, he's very well known, So the Tax Compliant Office was established by Meade Emery in OSA, providing a direct line for information and orders between the IRS and OSA. So the hidden hand. Yeah. Now let's.
There it is. There's how the IRS controls those people in the yellow coats who control or who are there with their AR-15s and stuff on foreign soil and domestic soil. There we go. That's how that can all be. That's how that the flow of command and the flow of money goes with that. Wow.
Right.
Yeah. And protected by, or no, they're not protected by the First Amendment. So okay.
No.
The Geneva Convention.
So. Yeah, so this brings us back to the trademarks, which is where we jumped off on that. So much has been made about a purported gift, quote unquote, of trademarks from L. Ron Hubbard, quote unquote, to the Religious Technology Center on the 10th of May, 1982. And RTC has been broadly promoted as the quote unquote owner of those trademarks. But as we demonstrate conclusively, as well with many documents, the trademarks that supposedly were given to RTC were precisely selected with the great premeditation by Meade Emery for the express purpose of retaining control over those marks and by extension over any and all other trademarks. The gift was really just a clever sting operation devised by Meade Emery, as was only later revealed. Emery and his accomplices, the other tax and probate attorneys, like we mentioned the Carno brothers and Heller, who drafted the contracts and estate papers, made sure that all commercial interest in those key trademarks remained with L. Ron Hubbard's estate, later to be transferred to Authors Family Trust B, as in the letter B, and in secret from there to CST by an order from the IRS, thus giving CST full and final controlling interest in those 8 carefully selected key marks. It was a very coldly and calculated maneuver.
Yeah.
So it was also plotted well in advance because L. Ron Hubbard, LRH, by blanket transfer in 1958, assigned all trademarks to the Hubbard Communications Office, later to be absorbed into the Church of Scientology of California. Just one of several trademark records proves that somebody was transferring important trademarks out of CSC and back into L. Ron Hubbard's estate property as early as 1975. So somebody was doing something behind Ron's back. That somebody was almost certainly IRS operative and attorney Norton S. Carno, who was known to have been representing CSC as early as 1973 against the IRS, and by late 1975 is documented as having become a trusted insider in the CSC and the Guardian's office. These surreptitious transfers of intellectual property back to L. Ron Hubbard, quote unquote, and therefore his estate property were prerequisites to the plan of later fraudulently to appear to transfer them to RTC. So it was a big shell game.
Right.
Basically. This complexity had a determined, if fraudulent, purpose to make RTC appear to be the most powerful, important corporation over Scientology, thereby hiding CST's actual ownership and control. So, basically, a complete catalog of all 150 odd trademarks that RTC and its lawyers can honestly claim that RTC owns were transferred. It doesn't need to be, but because they're all worthless without RTC having complete ownership of the 8 key trademarks, and that's the one thing Meade Emery and Company made sure RTC did not get. CST has complete controlling interest in those key trademarks, because those are the it's like Mickey Mouse, Goofy, Donald Duck, that type of thing for Disney. Star Wars, Marvel, that sort of thing. So basically, the first thing that seems to throw people encountering the record of all of this is that they assign the entire interest in goodwill. Quite simply, it's a lie, and a very clever lie, that Meade Emery and the attorneys executing this fraud knew that the Assignment Services Division of the United States Patent and Trademark Office does not examine instruments, documents of assignment, and that the act of recording a ministerial act and not a determination of the document's validity or its effect on the title to an application or registration. So they didn't even look at the stuff. They just said, okay. And they knew this ahead of time, and that's how they got away with it. So, but the full truth of the matter is contained in a declaration, supposedly, from LRH, who was missing at the time.
Right.
And filed in his name a court case in May of 1981 by way of Meade Emery's top assistant, Sherman Lenski, one of the Lenski brothers. And it says, I've transferred my religious trademarks to the Religious Technology Center, but I retain full ownership of any commercial applications of the marks, as well as full ownership of my copyrights and patent rights, none of which have been transferred. Now, that's quite a different story from the one told by the Trademark Office's more ministerial act of recordation reproduced. Of course, all the commercial interests in those marks that were retained for the Hubbard estate passed over to the author's family trust B, and then from there to CST as a result of the IRS Scientology closing agreement. So they forced it in a court case. So now it's important to break down the odd collection of 8 crucial trademarks to see why these particular 8 were like Goofy, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and all that stuff, carefully selected by Emery from the approximately 90 trademarks that were used at the time of the fraudulent 1982 gift. So this is the S double triangle, the Dianetics triangle, ability, word mark, which is a magazine named the Sea Org symbol, the word Scientology in capital letters, not capital S, lowercase, big difference. Because if it's capital letters, it's a corporate entity.
Right.
That's how the IRS manipulates you.
The name on our driver's license.
If you ever get anything from, if you ever get anything from the IRS, it's all in capital letters because they're not addressing you. They're addressing a corporation that has your name.
Right.
You need to know this, people. It's time to open your eyes. The Scientology cross, and then those are the big ones. The Scientology cross is now by CST is now required in every Scientology organization for delivery of both courses and auditing. Denial of use would eradicate Scientology worldwide. Yeah. So this is it. These symbols, they almost remind me a little bit of your Freemasonry type situations.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah,
the symbology of the whole thing. If these things aren't present, it isn't what we're delivering, and what they're delivering is not real Scientology, the subject.
Right.
They're delivering something else. Just like the IRS sends you a letter, they're not addressing you; they're addressing the corporation named as you in capital letters. Yeah. So the cunning and plotting necessary to create a false and fraudulent, highly publicized gift of these crucial marks, only to withhold the controlling commercial interests and rights in them, knowing that with just these 8 marks, full control could be held and exercised over all of Scientology worldwide. So the deviousness, almost too much to entertain, but the facts speak for themselves. The trademark records demonstrate that things like this cannot happen by accident. Meade Emery, working to establish IRS control over Scientology through the 3 non-Scientologist tax attorneys, Heller and the Lenski brothers, they were our special directors to run CST, knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how to pull it off in a way that would keep thousands, if not millions, completely in the dark. And this fraud has been going on for the last 43 years, roughly.
No.
Okay. So we're going to jump around here a little bit just to give you a flavor, because we've only got an hour to do this. So more revelations have come to light regarding the IRS and the current leaders of Scientology. David Miscavige, CST, and all that. So what happened is we found out about a tax compliance manual that was laid down as the law from the IRS to the church. Reveals previously unknown information about the new power structure of the organization. This has to do with the Sea Org. Manual was created in 1993, right around the time that they said the war is over with the IRS, which was the same year closing arguments were secretly signed by the IRS and church officials. The tax compliance manual is published by sanction of the Church of Spiritual Technology. Of course it was. The senior corporation, which owns all the copyrights, like we mentioned earlier. The manual is significant in many respects, not the least of which is a sweeping relocation of power that was once vested in Scientology's Sea organization. This is super important.
Mm-hmm.
The Sea Org was originally set up by LRH to exercise supreme and absolute authority over all of Scientology. You had the Commodore's Messenger Org. These guys worked for him. They got his orders put into action and everything like that. That's how important this stuff was. Okay, so there's a whole chart that I did a course on back in 1989. The Church and You and how all this stuff was set up, and Miscavige has completely gutted that, and now it's just Miscavige. There's no organizing board; it's just him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's the truth of the matter, really. The Sea Org was originally set up by LRH, and then what happened is, let me get this straight here, but buried in the language of the tax compliance manual is clear evidence that the new corporations are in control now, that the Sea Org members are merely employees of the corporations, and that the Sea Org members can be summarily dismissed at the sole discretion by the directors of the corporation.
Right. So that's why when my folks were still in the church, my mom was in the Guardian's office. She was not Sea Org, but she and my dad got out of there when they were requiring all Guardian's office staff to be Sea Org, and that would make sense why this corporation would need them to be Sea Org. And also, I was pulling up a little Sun Tzu quote here from The Art of War about this. When you're talking about the IRS war, when Sun Tzu said, "The practical art of war, the best thing of all, is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good. So too, it is better to recapture an army entire than to destroy it, to capture a regiment, a detachment, or company entire than to destroy them." So yeah, that concept of rather than destroying the Church of Scientology, keep the infrastructure, keep the buildings, keep the Sea Org members, keep all, the loyal officers, the people. So yeah.
So, and that's exactly what this is. It says it's likely. Let me back up here. Let's see. The principles and yep. So suppressed was the information to Los Angeles Superior Court Judge John P. Shook as in 1997, October 29th, in Wallersheim, which was a guy that was suing the church. Big court case. The phrase "not one dime for Wallersheim" is what Miscavige said. The Sea Org is the unincorporated association, which is the power center. Note, unincorporated association. Okay, we'll get into more of this here in a minute, which is the power center. David Miscavige is its highest ranking member. Okay. Now, did you just hear what I said?
With David
Miscavige is its highest ranking member.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So it is an unincorporated association that is overseen by CST.
Hey. So that's why he wears the captain bars of the Sea Org on his shoulders.
Yeah, it is likely that if the church officials had disclosed the content of their tax compliance manual, such a ruling would have been all but impossible. Although Miscavige, chairman of the IRS-spawned Church Tax Compliance Committee, may arguably be the highest-ranking member of the Sea Org, a careful reading of the tax compliance manual strongly suggests that the position legally is meaningless.
Right.
Meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman of the board.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the guy who looks up to his biggest role model, and I've had, like I said before, Marty Rathbun told me that Miscavige looks up to the fictional character of Don Corleone in The Godfather as his role model.
Right. And
If you've ever seen that movie, you're like, wait, what?
Right. And that makes sense what they did with the pilot, what they put the cement shoes on him, very mafia type, very.
Yeah. You're dealing with a mafia in the church. That's right. That's how he operates.
Yeah.
Okay. A careful reading of the tax compliance manual strongly suggests that the position legally is meaningless, to repeat, and that the Sea Org has been effectively negated as any kind of power center. It's merely a facade.
Right.
The manual first establishes that, and I quote, all individuals in the Sea organization are employees of the local organization, corporation, in which they work. The Sea organization is a religious order within the ecclesiastical structure of Scientology, but is not an incorporated organization itself and has no staff or employees. Wow. The Sea Org contract is binding ecclesiastically, but is not an employment contract.
Yeah, so it's interesting how they did that. It's literally like when I was saying the thing about Miscavige has the captain bars on him, like you would in the Navy, but he's not a flag officer. He doesn't have the stars the way that I think there is some legal authority that a flag officer holds in the military, but someone who is a full bird, either a colonel or a captain, does not have that same authority that a flag officer would have. So I've always found it interesting looking at him like, why don't they put admiral stars on him? They have him wearing captain because, that's not, it doesn't have any kind of, it's a very similar thing of being a commissioned officer in the military. So, it's just an interesting aside there about that. The same thing with the legally binding is not coming from him. It's coming from those who are above him.
Above him, right? Exactly.
Just like flag officers in the military,
So to repeat, the Sea Org contract, the billionaire contract, I don't have any problem with it being a billionaire's. It's just saying, hey, you're making a big commitment here. We come back. I get it. Other people make fun of it and everything like that. That's because they don't have any reality on past lives.
Right.
All right. That's fine. So it's not a legally binding contract. All Sea Org members sign standard employment contracts with the corporation at which they are currently working. If they are transferred to another organization, they will sign a new employment contract with that corporation for their period of employment. Having established that the Sea Org is a religious order only and that the Sea Org contract is not binding legally, only ecclesiastically, the manual then provides corporate bylaws, part of which state, this is from Section 3, religious orders. The church may establish and maintain religious orders, the purposes of which shall be the carrying out of the religious and administrative activities of this church, and then in capital letters, and corporation. Then the tax compliance manual spells out where the final power and authority over the Sea Org lies. Section 6. Here it comes. Discretion of directors. Membership in a religious order, ordination, or affiliation may be denied or revoked for cause deemed to be sufficient by the directors in their sole discretion. This is what happened to David Mayo. Because LRH wanted to transfer all of the Scientology technology to David Mayo in a separate corporation. And when Miscavige got wind of this, they made him run around a tree for 12 hours a day.
Right.
I'm not joking.
Right. So he did pass off the tech hat to David Mayo, but
he tried to. They stopped it before it happened.
Yeah.
Because of what we're talking about here today. Okay. Now, given that the corporate directors, which would include special directors, quote unquote, Mead Emery, Lenski Brothers, Heller, and all that, as they are not excluded in the wording, can terminate Sea Org membership at any time in their sole discretion, and given that the only legally binding contract Sea Org members have is the employment contract with the corporation where they work for $50 a week, then the Sea Org, apart from its function as a religious fellowship, could be considered as little more than customary for corporate employees. According to the tax compliance manual, the power lies with corporate directors. All right, time out.
Yeah.
Okay. What LRH intended and what these guys intended are two entirely different things. So these guys are corporate employees that are being paid $50 a week plus room and board for a corporation who no longer represents what L. Ron Hubbard intended it to be. This is where all the trouble began with these guys. And I mean, I could spend some time on, you should hear what they do with their elderly Sea Org members. It is shocking and appalling. They don't want them getting away, so they keep them locked up in former hotels on U.S. Alternate 19, in Florida at least. They don't let them check out. They want to make sure that they die there. I kid you not. This isn't the Church of Scientology, folks, that LRH wanted. This is these corporate tax attorneys and David Miscavige running the rules for CST, doing this to thousands and thousands of people in the name of a religious philosophy when it is not what Hubbard had intended. He had nothing to do with this.
Right.
Let me make that perfectly clear to any of our new listeners. So please get that.
Yeah, and so there were people that were privy to this kind of as if things were coming together. That's when Red Sharp left, right? When Sea Org came along, he was there at St. Hill, right, with his girlfriend or wife.
LRH, supposedly LRH declared him.
Yeah, because they came in and did the whole attention on deck thing. Were yelling at people, and Reg just sat there, lit up a single cigarette, stood up, and walked away. Yeah. It's like, something's...
Well, he knew the score.
Yeah.
So given that the corporate directors, which would include special directors, as I was saying, as these are not excluded in the wording, can terminate Sea Org membership at any time in their sole discretion, and given that the only legally binding contract Sea Org members have is the employment contract with the corporation where they work, then the Sea Org, apart from its function as a religious fellowship, could be considered as little more than customary or corporate employees. According to the Tax Compliance Manual, the power lies with the corporate directors, no longer lies with the Sea Org. A recent investigation disclosed that there are special directors in the powerful ruling corporation, Church of Spiritual Technology, who are not even adherents of Scientology, much less members of the Sea Org, which we've been talking about. The Tax Compliance Manual will be explored more fully later on in other articles that we're going to bring up here. The Tax Compliance Manual is basically what they can do and what they can't do from the IRS. That's their marching orders. Now, here's another interesting thing. The Tax Compliance Manual states that the IRS has been the knowing party to the establishment of tax compliant sections to govern every Scientology church and mission, bringing about an unprecedented closure between church and state.
Right, there it is.
Excuse me, this is very interesting. Yeah, there it is again. The tax compliance section has been formed in the Corporate and Legal Rudiments branch of Office of Special Affairs International, OSA. It is staffed with veteran OSA Inc. crew who are extremely knowledgeable and experienced in tax and finance matters. There will also be a tax compliance officer in each continental OSA office. A primary function of the tax compliance section is to ensure that all churches and missions comply with all requirements of tax exemption, as do their parishioners. The Office of Special Affairs is merely a part of the Church of Scientology International, and the Church of Scientology International is represented by its president, who was Heber Jensch, who has disappeared and is very likely not alive anymore, is a signatory to the closing agreement subject to the mandates of that agreement. Heber was around for years, a wonderful human being. So they forced him to sign it, I'm sure. The closing agreement verifies that the IRS is a party in informed consent to the creation and operation of these tax compliant sections inside the church. The closing agreement requires annual reports to be submitted to the IRS, and part of the requirements include reporting of any ecclesiastical modifications or restructuring of any entity within the church's command channels. The annual report shall include any changes to the ecclesiastical management structure of the church, and 9, reporting of any amendment of any directive concerning the treatment of funds. They want to know where the money is, how much it is, and what it's being put on. The Tax Compliant Manual treats extensively of the handling of funds by church personnel and constitutes a definitive modification and restructuring of CSI to include the organizational tax compliance sections within OSA. If the IRS had not been informed of the tax compliance manual and of the addition of the tax compliance sections inside the Churches of Scientology, then the Church Tax Compliance Committee signatories would have been in violation of terms of the closing agreement and therefore liable to extreme penalties outlined in the agreement. But the tax compliance manual also says the tax compliance section is concerned with the activities of church organizations throughout the world, not just those located in the United States.
Yeah.
This is the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
Recognition of tax exemption by the IRS opens the door for similar recognition of local orgs and missions by tax authorities in many other countries. Having already established that, there will also be a tax compliance officer in each continental OSA, Office of Special Affairs office. This means that these extensions of IRS, there specifically and only to enforce compliance to IRS codes, are now situated on foreign soil, but camouflaged by their existence inside the churches.
Yeah, right.
Sound familiar?
Yeah. Yep.
The IRS's new power over the church's activities is perhaps best summed up in one chilling sentence from the tax compliance manual. And this is a quote: "Any question as to whether a post qualifies as a ministerial capacity should be referred to the tax compliance officer, Office of Special Affairs International. Any question as to whether a post qualifies as a ministerial capacity should be referred to the tax compliance officer, Office of Special Affairs International." What does that mean? Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So essentially, we've got the IRS functioning internationally now through the Office of Special Affairs within the Church of Scientology.
Yeah, the church has been thoroughly and completely infiltrated. And I need to say this. The church has been thoroughly and completely infiltrated by a body
Mm-hmm.
that it itself is not part of the United States government.
That's correct. So, yeah, there's...
So not only is it a shell game, it's a double shell game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a major dramatization of something that happened a very long time ago in a galaxy not so far away.
Right. So any question as to whether a post qualifies as a ministerial capacity, what post, pray tell, would qualify as a ministerial capacity? There's only one. Auditors.
Oh. Yeah. Huh.
You follow, folks?
Yeah, they don't want people using...
No, they don't want people using the tech.
No.
They want to know who's doing it, why they're doing it. I mean, it's just a smoking gun.
Yeah. Especially the upper levels. It sounds like, the fact that they've got a license.
Yeah.
And then the fact that auditors, So they don't want anybody actually doing Scientology, and the ones who are doing it, they want to have them very, very, very under observation.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is the last part that we want to get into, and this is why. This is why all of this happened, and this is not fringe. This is real, folks. Federal cover-up of Scientology in military intelligence.
Good.
A chronological investigative analysis of once classified intelligence reports, corporate papers, copyright and trademark records, court documents, and other public records has exposed a massive and pervasive coordination of the executive and judicial branches in order to effect a cover-up since at least 1972. This is after OT3 was released, of copyrighted Scientology technologies being illegally utilized in the United States strategic intelligence. The study shows that the cover-up has reached all the way to the Oval Office in the United States, the White House, in both Republican and Democratic administrations, including those of George Bush and Jimmy Carter. Bush's knowledge and the involvement dates back at least to his term as director of the CIA. If you remember, he was a director of the CIA before he was president by over almost a decade and a half.
Right, and that's when also the raid occurred, right?
Yep.
When he was the head
he was director when the raid occurred.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, yeah.
Yep. The time limit events documents that an employee of the National Security Agency, and you're going to recognize this name, Harold Putoff, Puthoff, infiltrated Scientology, completed its confidential upper-level courses, the OT levels, and almost immediately secured a top-secret contract with the Central Intelligence Agency to set up the CIA-initiated remote viewing intelligence program.
Yep, there it is.
The evidence is that the program secretly utilized Scientology techniques, intellectual property of Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard, without Hubbard's or any Scientology organization's knowledge or permission, and without compensation.
Right.
This is why they took the church out.
Mm-hmm.
The tech works, folks.
Yep.
The study also shows that Scientology's Guardian Office, headed by Mary Sue Hubbard, Hubbard's wife, had province over the intellectual properties being illegally used by the federal government. So they had to go in and yank this stuff as quickly as they could when they realized what they had.
Mm-hmm.
The Guardian's office became embroiled in protracted litigation via the churches of numerous FOIA, Freedom of Information Act suits against the NSA and the CIA. This is documented. The Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, and the Department of Defense, the Secret Service, and other executive branch departments and agencies. The Freedom of Information suits sought the release of documents related to Scientology and to L. Ron Hubbard that were known to exist, but were being withheld by the federal intelligence agencies and the Defense Department, among others, on grounds of national freaking security.
Yeah, they always use that.
Yeah.
Man.
Right. What's yours is ours because it's about national security.
Mm-hmm.
That's super suppressive.
Right.
So, one ruling against the Scientologists even went so far as to justify withholding of documents about Scientology on the grounds that the director of the CIA, quote, is responsible for protecting intelligence sources and methods, capitalized, from unauthorized disclosure, emphasis added. Neither Hubbard or Mary Sue nor the Guardian's office knew the exact nature of the documents, nor about Hubbard's copyrighted materials being illegally used by the federal intelligence agencies. They stole it.
Yeah, they did.
Scientology's Freedom of Information suit spanned the very time when the top-secret Scientology-based remote viewing program had budgeted were not only being expanded, but were being utilized by the Department of Defense, the President's National Security Council, NSC, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But the documents being sought by the Guardian's office were never released. Mm-hmm. The FBI raided the church's offices in July of 1977, and the federal government filed criminal charges accusing Mary Sue Hubbard, LRH's wife, and the Guardian's office of criminal spying. A strange irony. They had to get rid of her.
Yeah.
So they made up false evidence to get her jailed. The sensational case resulted in Mary Sue Hubbard and 10 Guardian's office co-defendants being sentenced to jail without a trial.
So,
let me repeat. By federal judge Charles R. Ritchie, which led to the ultimate disbanding of Scientology's Guardian's office. So it was an inside job.
Yep.
This opened the way for a new senior corporation, Church of Spiritual Technology. That's what we were talking about earlier. Doing business as the L. Ron Hubbard Library. It was set up in 1982, right after the Supreme Court had upheld Mary Sue Hubbard's conviction. The Supreme Court upheld Mary Sue Hubbard's conviction without a trial.
Wow, that's just...
Let that sink in. Let that sink in. I wonder what Supreme Court justices those were and who put them on the bench. What president? I'd be very curious to find out.
What year was this?
This would have been 70. Set up. Let's see. It was set up in 1982, right after it was 1982. Upheld Mary Sue Hubbard's conviction for the express purpose of gaining. And this is why. And this is a smoking gun. Just stunning to me. It was set up in 1982, right after the Supreme Court had upheld Mary Sue Hubbard's conviction for the express purpose of gaining receivership and control of L. Ron Hubbard's copyrights. Wake up, people.
Right. So this is a lot to take in for me. This is very restitutive too. I was literally conceived out of this stuff. This body was literally conceived.
This was going on. Yeah, that's right.
And
But it was in the founding of this corporation that the first hint of the cover-up by the federal government lay buried. So it's obvious why this happened.
Yes.
They stole the OT levels and used them for state purposes and made them state secrets, and then punished LRH's wife and LRH for having that information, and then tore it apart from the inside out.
Yeah. And they needed to get Mary Sue out of the way so that they could take over completely.
Right.
And they did get her out of the way.
She died.
Yeah.
She died from cancer, lung cancer, alone and separated from LRH. And when she asked, did he say that he loved me? They told her directly, no, he never does. These are the heartless bastards that run this corporation.
That's right.
Demons are friendlier.
Mm-hmm.
In my eyes. It really pisses me off. I knew Mary. She was a really strong being. And to have something like that happen to somebody really makes my blood boil.
Right.
I'm going to keep my shit together here. In an exclusive 1997 story, the Public Research Foundation, which is the organization that uncovered all of this, reported that Meade Emery, former assistant to the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service and former legislation attorney, Joint Committee on Taxation, had been a co-founder of CST, Scientology's most senior corporation. That corporation now controls all of the copyrights, which we talked about earlier. But the discovery of Emery, a non-Scientologist, in such an unusual position raised red flags, since Emery's involvement in setting up the corporation had been hidden for 15 years, right under LRH's nose. Then it was learned that Emery had been an assistant to Commissioner of the IRS, Donald C. Alexander, from 1975 through 1977. Strangely, those were the very years that an IRS employee, Gerald Wolfe, was supposedly a Scientology double agent, quote unquote, guilty of numerous thefts of IRS documents from Mary Sue Hubbard in the Guardian's office, leading to the arrests and convictions. So you can see it was a setup.
Yeah.
Other oddities also surfaced. These are outpoints. According to the U.S. Claims Court ruling, none of the founders of CST but one had any religious connection with Scientology. They were non-Scientologist tax probate attorneys. 2, the October 1993 IRS tax exemption for CST was granted a then secret closing agreement only after a final roundup of every intellectual property ever produced by L. Ron Hubbard had been completed. So they got everything together before they did it. Then in November of 29th, 1993, scarcely 2 months after CST had been granted tax exemption by the IRS in a secret closing agreement, all 7,730 of L. Ron Hubbard's copyrights were quietly transferred to CST.
Quiet, yeah.
But the IRS closing agreement, once released, revealed that it had been the final step in the United States government's 20-year campaign to secretly get L. Ron Hubbard's copyrighted technologies and techniques being illegally used by the federal agencies and strategic intelligence firmly under secret federal government control. This is why the church is the way that it is.
That's right.
They want to spin in every single last person that walks through those doors. Their job isn't to free beings. Their job is to implant and interpolate beings.
That's right. And then them having their hands on that with the remote viewing programs and everything, that, it seems like they would want to do anything to ensure that nobody actually is using the technology to free beings, and also nobody's using OT abilities anymore. And that's why, I was going to say, probably when we wrap it up, I have something else to say about that. But yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll put a pin in that.
Yeah.
We'll get there here in a minute. So, to repeat, so certain was the IRS that the secret agreement would never be exposed, that it included a continued conspiracy clause requiring all signatories to agree in collusion to protect Meade Emery and all other quote-unquote current or former employees of IRS and the United States government against any and all claims of their having been involved in a continued quote-unquote conspiracy. They used the words continued conspiracy. Yet it was just such a continued conspiracy that apparently had brought the secret closing agreement into being. The federal government further secured its position by secretly setting up an illegal and unconstitutional, quote, church tax compliance committee to enforce Treasury regulations on the structure and function of the various Scientology organizations, including permanent installation of the tax compliance officers and the tax manual in each organization. Senator Roth's inaction on the executive summary regarding Mead Emery's involvement with the creation of Scientology's most senior corporation has now raised questions whether the legislative branch has been involved in the cover-up as well.
Okay.
These are guys we voted in office.
Yeah, well.
If that doesn't piss you off, I don't know what would.
Right. Voted or placed. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Voted or placed. Yeah, or they just said, they gave you the impression that you voted them into office.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah. And, on top of that, they looted over $175 million from LRH's account.
Mm-hmm.
Just missing.
Right.
Out of $400 million plus after he departed.
Mm-hmm.
So, discuss.
Right. So this is all very restimulative for me and all very, I need to go back and listen to this, but I did want to ask, and I'm sure other folks have this question too. What is this from? Is this from a book or is this from an article online that people can go track down?
Yeah, this is from the article that I mentioned the other day in the last podcast, which is the IRSology.com website. It hasn't been updated in 2 decades. Okay, but somebody is paying for it because there's no ads.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is paying for this to stay online, and it's changed servers and is in a country now that it can't be pulled down where it was before, and it was pulled down, and they moved it to a country that it couldn't be. So it's SC-I-R-S-OLOGY. Again, that's SC-I-R-S-OLOGY.com. IRSology.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the smoking gun, time, place, form, and event. There's a ton more data on this. But the whole idea is, and the point that I wanted to make with this is this is how LRH's Scientology became subjugated because of one reason. And that reason is, and I'm sorry to beat it to death, it worked well. So well that the government wanted to steal the technology and use it for their own covert means.
Mm-hmm. Turn it into a weapon.
Turn it into a weapon and then spin everybody that comes into touch with it inside out.
Yep.
And take them for everything they've got at the same time and make them as miserable as possible in the process.
That's right.
All in the name of freeing their soul and in humanity, making freed beings. Instead, they're interpolating and implanting beings.
Yeah, and that's a game as old as time.
I'm sorry to get so dark. Yeah, I'm sorry to get so dark about this, but this is why Scientology, the Church of Scientology, the corporation, has such a bad rap.
Right. Yeah, what I was going to say is 1993 seems like a long time ago, 30 years later when we're in 2023, and I think there's a tendency in today's society to think that history is over and that everything, nothing is dynamic anymore. However, I would say that there's still operations going on with this. There's still a need to protect the tech. There's still a need to, that's why we are here. We are doing this. There aren't too many people actually doing this anymore.
That's right. Right. We're on the front lines of this.
Mm-hmm.
We are on the front lines, and we're willing to have the confront, stand up and say something about it, publish it, make it known. This document has been around over 25 years on the net. 25 years. So it's time to look at this and go, okay, this makes sense. It's time to get your butt up the bridge, run up the bridge, don't walk. If it's not with us, do it with somebody that knows what they're doing and does it standardly, because the gains are phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And now is your chance.
Right.
Because, and I got to read this. I want to read this again at a new unit of time. This is the Shades of Night reference that LRH wrote in 1952. We wouldn't have a ghost of a chance right now unless Homo sapiens actually had slugged up from the mud to a point where he had a little leisure time. We happen to be going through a period when man has made himself relatively free by the use of the machine, just after a period when he was terribly enslaved by the machine, the early days of industrialism, and just before the machine is employed for his utter enslavement. The reason you've got Scientology is, to a large degree, right here, there's a little breathing period on Earth. This was written in 1952. I don't know how many years it is from here to the other, but you've already seen the slavery states start with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It became dangerous for knowledge to be disseminated. It became terribly important to them to shut all the boundaries on knowledge. You've seen those curtains shutting down. Those are the shades of night falling. The whole nonsense of thought police is moving right straight in. The shades of night. We've got a very short time. It isn't destruction of civilization by the atomic bomb. It's, quote, let's shut down the communication lines of knowledge, unquote. Here, for a brief moment, we have them free and open. There's a tremendous urgency against that. It is real. It is going to happen here on Earth. LRH. So, folks, give that some thought and look at what's been going on the last few years with COVID and the internet and 5G and all these strange things going on, information technologies, and everybody listening and looking at what you're saying and what you're doing. This is what LRH was talking about 70 years ago. Time to get up the bridge. We're here to help. Get in touch with us. We'll get you going. Make it work however we can. The more of us, the more OTs we have, the more of a chance we have to turn this thing around. And believe you me, we can turn it around quickly with just a handful of OTs. So for Jason Roba and myself, Jonathan Burke, we bid you adieu, namaste, and we love you. Bye-bye.